Hey everyone, welcome to week 67. Today is day 3, Wednesday. This is the third day of our ongoing further week. And, Monday I couldn't push as much as I wanted to. Yesterday a little bit better. Today we'll see if I can push myself to go a little bit further.
Okay, let's get started. This is day 3. This is our third day on our further week. And remember, what we're trying to do, emphasis on trying, what we're trying to do this week is to push further. Not only to push. I mean, we should be pushing ourselves every single day. That should be a given. But this is about going a little bit further. This is about believing that in attempting to go a bit further than the work that we usually do every day, we are hopefully going to get a bit closer to the artist that we want to be, a bit closer to the paintings that we want to paint. So this is not just about pushing for the sake of pushing. I think that there has to be a valid reason behind wanting to push. In my case, that means wanting to distort, wanting to disproportion the figure or the portrait, which is the case with the paintings that we're going to do during this week. But there has to be a driving force. If you're just doing it for the sake of doing it, if you're just turning everything on its head just to see what happens, there's value to that too. Art can also be very playful. Painting can certainly share that same lighter essence, and maybe through feeling that painting is not this sacred thing that can't be messed with, you're going to find a ton of alternatives to say what you want to say. It is only through understanding that things are not sacred, that things are not untouchable. It is when we accept that we can manipulate those things. It is when we grant ourselves the right to question those things that amazing things happen. So I'm obviously for experimenting from time to time, just throwing everything out there and seeing what happens, seeing what sticks. Let's be honest here. The chances of those things working are kind of slight. Ideally, you want to have some sense of what's going on. Maybe you surrender control. It's not about just always exercising control over what you're doing, but you want to have some sense of where you're heading. You want to have some idea of why you are taking these actions. So maybe we can understand it as building a playground. We are surrendering control, but we are still building this playground where we can move freely. We are accepting that that playground is going to have some boundaries, but inside those boundaries, we can do whatever we want. I've always thought that the best of paintings, they always have inherent parameters. It's not about just bursting those open, and it's not about just painting exploding onto the world, like creating universes as it expands. No, not really. I don't understand painting that way. I do think parameters suit painting. I think painting is at its best when it acknowledges that it is working within parameters, and it's totally fine. It doesn't feel diminished by those boundaries. It doesn't feel like there's things that it can't explore. No, I think that when we recognize that we can do a ton of things based on, these fundamental rule sets that create those parameters, then we are very accepting of painting. We're not trying to make painting do something that it can't do. And I think that that's the whole point during this week. There's nothing terribly weird happening in terms of the formal construction of the painting. We're not doing super experimental technical stuff because honestly, I was going to say I don't feel the need anymore, but let's just say right now, because we never know what happens in the future, but I don't feel the need to experiment in the kitchen like I did maybe 15 years ago. 15 years ago, I was like a little kid in a candy store, and I believed that I had to try almost every single medium out there and every technique out there, and that ultimately I was going to be able to mix all those different manners of expressing through paint. But that was then, and it was certainly fun. But now I'm in a place where I am far more comfortable being a very modest painter. I'm really fine with distilling painting to its barest. A very simple surface, like the surface that we've painted on for months now. I have to check if it's been a year, but we've painted on raw paper for many, many months now. So there's no real mystery to our paper. Aside from it being thick enough to withstand paint, that's about it. There's nothing weird about the paper that we choose. And in terms of paint, I think you guys have seen me either use my medium very sparingly, which is an alkyd gel, which is an alkyd medium, And many times, many times, I don't even use medium at all. I just use paint. So straight paint and an unprimed surface, I think that's pretty good if we're going to distill the painting act. I think that's pretty fair. The fact that you feel that you don't need a lot of stuff to make a painting, that actually feels awesome. That you're not beholden to specific mediums. You're not beholden to the way you prime your surface. No, this is just paint. This is just very raw paint. And I love that. And of course, I probably wouldn't have gotten here if I hadn't primed hundreds of canvases and I hadn't done hundreds of indirect paintings. So I think I reached this point in my life because I just wanted to shed a lot of things that I thought were, I'm not going to say unnecessary. I would never ever say unnecessary. Those things are part of the makeup of some of the paintings that I love the most, that I'm so grateful to have experienced in my life. So I'm never going to say that those things are not intrinsically tied to painting. But for me, in this moment in my life, I just think that I can let them go in order for me to pay attention to the simplest act of painting, which is just mixing paint on a palette and then applying it on a surface and trying to generate good enough relationships so that you can configure whatever the subject matter of your painting is, and you can communicate based on the way you decided to present that subject matter. This week has been awesome because it has given me the chance to push, but to also remind myself that I am working within those very simple parameters. So yesterday, for example, was a different painting from the one that we did on Monday, because on Monday, we had kept our palette, our primary color palette, from a week ago. But yesterday, I used raw sienna and red ochre. Those two were Old Holland colors. So they're very nice, thick, kind of gritty colors. Beautiful, beautiful paint. I mean, Old Holland paint is fantastic. Raw sienna is a color that throughout the years, I've never quite seen its purpose. I don't see the value in it. But with yesterday's painting, I realized how versatile and how weird a color it can be. Now, obviously, the painting of Giacometti from yesterday is red ochre dominant. So that gave me a chance to explore what would happen when I introduced the raw sienna. And wow. I mean, one of the nicest things about those red ochres is that if you're able to control your painting where there are areas of your painting that you scrub onto the surface, so they end up having a transparent nature. It doesn't matter if your paint is a transparent pigment or a more opaque pigment. If you scrub your paint enough so that your surface filters through the thin layer of paint, you're going to get a very nice transparent effect on that pigment. That quote-unquote transparent manner of expressing through that pigment is very, very different. I mean, vastly different from the one that you get when you mix that pigment with white. And that blew me away. Yesterday, when I was mixing red ochre with white, and especially when I was mixing raw sienna into that mix, oh wow, I was getting neutrals. I was getting like grays. I mean, this should be like an orange ochre. Because if you think about it, you're mixing like a yellowish earth, a dark yellow earth with a dark red earth. You're going to get like a dark orange earth. But no, I was getting like greens and neutrals. There were moments in that painting that reminded me of how incredible it must have felt for these Renaissance, high Renaissance Baroque painters. And I know I always refer to them, but how incredible it must have felt to recognize those amazing possibilities that opened up when two colors suddenly came together. It wasn't about having a ton of hues available. It wasn't about desperately feeling the need for precious pigments. No, it was about working with what you have. I think I'm going to die, and I'm always going to be in awe of how much they were able to do with so little. Nowadays, we have incredible colors. Incredible. I had a blast painting with bismuth yellow, quinacridone magenta, and cobalt teal last week. We have to be alive today in order to be able to paint with those three pigments. But again, there is something so beautiful about just very basic fundamental painting. It's incredible. Now, today, we opened up our palette again, and I'm painting one of the artists that I respect the most in this world. He certainly is one of my favorite artists. And I apologize to him because I'm painting Mike Mignola. And I don't even know if this would be a character of Hellboy. You know, I don't know. Maybe he would be part of some short stories. Something that's Hellboy adjacent. Maybe it's BPRD. Maybe it's like a little cameo on Screw-On Head. But anyways, I'm trying to paint Mike. And in some way, I'm trying to channel some of the distortions that are inherent to his work. I can't draw like Mike Mignola. I don't think anyone can draw like Mike Mignola. I think that we can learn from the decisions that he makes in terms of how he distills very complicated shapes into very simple designs. I think all of us would be better artists if we learned specifically that from him, but I can't do it. My mind is too busy, unfortunately, to be able to unsee the amount of information that I observe every single time I open my eyes, every single time I look at nature. So I'm still painfully tied. I'm still chained to the vastness of nature. I still see too much. It pains me to say it because I really wish that I was just a far simpler painter. I think you have to understand the makeup of things in order to manipulate their shape. And I think you have to be able to tap into the simple essence of things. And when I think about those things, I think they're just lifetimes away, like eons away from me. To this day, they still escape me. But what's awesome is that when I look at Mignola's work, I'm reminded that that is a path worth traveling. When I can see the result of all that knowledge and all the education that is behind the act of simplifying, that becomes like the most attractive thing in the world for me. So even though my attempt at painting this, Mike character, this character that would be in a little corner of a panel in one of Mike's books, even though I think it's still kind of complicated, I'm trying, I'm pushing. The idea during this week is just to push, to try, That's the best I can do, to just give myself the chance to try something out. And obviously, I'm having a blast with it. I gave Mike like this oval-shaped, kind of bullet-shaped head. I dropped the shoulders because, nothing against the early Hellboy, and I think I've said this before. Early Hellboy is amazing. He's like this broad-shouldered, super powerful dude. But the Hellboy in Hell design, that Hellboy that's broken, that feels vulnerable, that still feels like a badass because Hellboy is a fucking amazing character. Even though I'm able to recognize those things, those decisions that Mike made in the evolution of Hellboy, which I think are brilliant. They're absolutely brilliant. I mean, to me personally, and I'm being totally biased because I'm a fan, but I think the evolution, the simplification, the redesigning of Hellboy throughout the years is probably one of the most sophisticated and beautiful growths that I've ever seen in a comic book character. When I think of other characters, they go through phases. Like, there's been a ton of Hulks, there's been tons of ways of depicting Batman. Some of them are super cool, some of them are just way too busy and way too weird. But when I think of Hellboy, it just feels right. This is a character whose voice, as expressed in the comic books, and the way in which it has been visually presented to us, I think it's perfect. I think it's a perfect marriage. And like I said, I think that those things still escape me. Those things are still too complex for me to deal with. My mind still goes a million miles an hour, and I just have to teach myself how to slow down and how to make fewer, better decisions. But today I had a blast. I had painted him before. I did the beardless Mike for one of my Kickstarter book rewards, but I wanted bearded Mike. I wanted to give that a shot, and it was a ton of fun. So I'm very happy with the result. By the way, I still feel the screw-on head short, that is the best understanding of Mike's tone that I've ever seen in a short or a movie. I think we discussed this before, but I've enjoyed the Hellboy movies, the Del Toro movies, and I thought that the last movie was cool. I mean, it's a movie made for the fans because it just throws you right in the middle. And I think there's a ton of things that if you don't read the comic books, they're just going to fly over your head. You're not going to get any of that. And if you don't get any of those references, then the story just feels completely rushed. But I also thought that there was like a little bit of darkness that was cool in there. But I'm always going to be, frustrated because if you know Hellboy, there is such a beautiful darkness and dryness to him that is just so incredible that it pisses me off that nobody was able to understand how to depict that. I've thought about it, and Hellboy, maybe it's not like a big Hollywood thing. It just deserves like a darker story, like a simpler, darker story where you can really have a sense of his humor, because he is broken, and that's the most wonderful quality in him. Like the fact that he's very vulnerable and yet he's also this absurdly powerful being. Anyways, that was my rant. So Screw On Head, if you've never seen it, just buy that DVD. You won't regret it. It's Paul Giamatti, so the voice fits perfectly. I don't know. It's pretty amazing. Anyways, that's going to be it for today. Join us tomorrow where we continue with this effort. And what I'm noticing is that I just have to rely a little bit more on form, on my understanding of form. What I'm really trying to push here is form and edges. So maybe tomorrow we'll see if I can express that a little bit better. But that's tomorrow. I'll see you guys. Thank you. Love you. Bye.